I started my career actually in the opposite way compared to like many people in the industry because instead of like joining a studio and learning from people who already knew about making games, I had the wonderful idea to actually start my own studio when I was 17. So with a group of friends, we decided to spin up a gaming studio. Of course, we knew nothing about game development, so we started self teaching ourselves, all the things that we needed to do. And well, from that point, we ended up actually making a 54 people company that last 7 years. It was called Starwork GC. It's now dead, but like we made a couple games. We failed to actually raise funding for a very big game that we were making, an hero shooter when Overwatch was still not out yet, in that era. And so like I started from this very weird perspective. Then after the studio shut down, I ended up working at Madfinger Games, a studio that is from Czech Republic. They made a few famous games as well. And then I actually, after a couple months, I went straight to Unity, where today I am a senior software engineer. So apart from doing the consulting, which I do independently, I'm also a senior software engineer at Unity for multiplayer, and I also run my studio on the side, which is called Fatum Games, and it's actually what takes most of my time during the weekends at special.
Walk me. What I find so interesting is young people who are so interested in games that they just start getting into it on their own. And so like as a 17-year-old, you just decided to learn, let's figure out how to make a game studio. Like I don't think there are many 17-year-olds that manage to come out and create a 50-person company just learning through YouTube tutorials. What was that process like at such a young age, just getting into games?
So the fun thing is that I started, I've always been a gamer, right? So like many people in game development, we start like the passion stems from like us being gamers in the first place. Okay, so when I was 15, I actually stumbled upon a YouTube channel from a guy called Nictor. And basically he was making video tutorials in Italian because I'm Italian, for like Visual Basic and so on. So that's where I started coding. After a few years, I was like, okay, I really want to make games. I really want to learn how to make games. And so I found out a book from Will Goldstone about Unity 3, 4, something like that, like a very, very old version of Unity that teaches you how to make a little game. So I went through the book and I was like, okay, this is what I want to do in my life. But I can't do it all alone. Like I need people to help me in the journey. So like, the people I had closest to me were my school's friends. So I went to them and say, hey, shall we try? And there were many gamers there as well. So they all shared this passion. Of course, half of them, like, we lost them along the journey because building a gaming studio is not like making, it's not like playing games. It's very hard. And so they got discouraged and so on. But the other half, they grew into different roles and then we ended up doing things.
So, what were the different roles?
Well, we had 3D artists, we had 2D artists, we had developers, we had people who were making sounds, sound designers and so on. So there were lots of these. We even had like translators and so on. So we at the beginning, we tried to do everything in-house because we had no money, literally, to hire anybody outside. Freelancing and so on. So that was it. Like everyone was trying their best to also understand what they wanted to do with their life, because when you're 17, you are in that position where you are close to ending high school, to finishing high school, and then you have to think about what you want to do later, And for some people, this was also like the opportunity to figure out if they really wanted to pursue a career in games. And if they really wanted to, to lean into what they thought, what that was the thing that they wanted to do.
That's super cool. Really, like I think it's really impressive to just find young people just trying to build games and to end up building a 50-person game studio. But I want to move now to multiplayer because that's where you're an expert, and that's where kind of you absolutely caught my eye when I reached out and invited you as a guest on the show. From what I understand, multiplayer is, of course, you're trying to aim and shoot at people. You're trying to avoid any kind of lag and connect with lots of people at the same time. How exactly can you explain multiplayer to someone who maybe games and plays Call of Duty or League of Legends, but doesn't really understand what it means from a game development standpoint?
Yeah, so multiplayer is like the act of connecting different people, usually from different locations, which is the most
Yeah.
important and challenging part. Okay, so they can play and affect what is called the core loop of a game together. So the core loop is like basically, for example, in League of Legends, you go, you pick your character, you enter the game, and then you start farming minions, you start playing with against other characters. That's the core loop. Okay, that part is the core loop. So if you have multiple people who can play the core loop together, that's a multiplayer game. Okay, so now what is the complicated part, and why do we care so much about multiplayer? The complicated part is that these people are usually geographically far from each other, and that means that information has to travel across large distances. We are talking about hundreds of kilometers sometimes. So, and that takes time. Like even though information in the form of light is very fast, it still takes a few tens of milliseconds to travel from one device to another. And since computers are also very fast at processing information, those 50 milliseconds have a very big impact on what you see on your screen. So the main challenge is like latency, like this latency with this time that it takes to travel for information to travel from one device to another to synchronize the state of the core loop is what makes multiplayer games super complicated and very challenging to implement. And we can talk a bit more about that. But I don't know if I answered your question, Alessandro,
No,
if you wanted to know something more specific.
absolutely, you did. I think there are a lot of people who maybe wonder when they're playing a game, oh, there's this thing like ping, and you see like these milliseconds. And I guess that's what it is at the end of the day. It's just how long does it take for the server to register the action, then send it to the other player so everyone sees it. But what initially drew you to multiplayer games and like all these deep technical issues behind them? Like as someone who kind of started his own game studio and then got into gaming, why multiplayer? What was so appealing about it?
Well, because I always played multiplayer games since I was a child. Luckily, I had a lot of friends. Yeah, I still have a lot of
Yeah.
friends. But like, and we played together. Like, we played a lot of games together. I think the first one that I can recall was the Habbo Hotel. I don't know if you ever
I
played.
played Havo, man. I played Havo. Yeah,
It
dude.
was super.
Like
It was
Bubba.
basically
Yeah.
one of the first social MMOs. The metaverse back
Yes,
in
of course.
2005, 6, or something like that. So I started with that, and I was always like, curious about how do people manage to do this stuff. And then we went to shoot it. Like I started playing shooters. I remember a very big, old pay-to-win shooter called Operation 7. I don't know if you ever stumbled
No, I
upon
haven't
it.
heard of that one.
But yeah, it was a cool one. And so yeah, and then after that I moved to League of Legends. But like, and the thing is, I always played multiplayer games. So for me, they have this special meaning because they allowed me to connect with friends since I was a child, and so I wanted to be able to support other people doing the same thing, pretty much, and also try to connect more people today.
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
same reason.
So you've often said that making multiplayer is from like 10 times to 100 times harder. Like in your view, what are the top 3 hardest things that make multiplayer so difficult to do?
Well, the biggest offender is latency, as we mentioned before. So the fact
Yeah.
that information takes time to travel from one device to another, and so that we need to plan and like react to that. So that's the first one. The second one I will say is scaling challenges. So scaling challenges means that you need to plan for thousands of people, likely, I mean, hopefully, that will play your
Fingers
game at the
crossed.
same time. That will play your game at the same time, and so you need to support like you need to have a few systems that support like that scale of operations. While in a single player game, you simply have one person, one device.
Uh-huh.
They don't have to send information around. Like it's everything happens there. So it's way easier to make a single player game in that sense. And the third one is like cheating, which is like why people, not why, but how and why people hack a game or try to cheat in a game, which can ruin the experience for everybody. So that is a serious problem, especially in competitive games. And so I would say that that's the third big challenge. It also ties to another topic, which is keeping the fun for everybody. Because in a single player game, like you only have one player, so you can make them do, absolutely busted things. They can be overpowered and nobody will complain. Actually, they will feel very good. But in a multiplayer game, especially if it's competitive, that doesn't work because one person feels powerful and the other person feels awful, and they stop playing the game. So that's
Of course.
another more of a game design challenge in that sense.
And you see this so much with games like Call of Duty or even like Warzone, for instance. I know that there's so many aimbots, especially in a game where like you only have one life, and like Warzone where it ends. And how do players actually do this? Like, because it's something that I've always found interesting. I know that Riot has anti-cheat systems like Vanguard, which are like kernel level technology within the PC, and I can only speak of this because I've had my producer tell me these things. So I don't actually understand it technically. I know it's within the machine, but can you kind of, just for the audience and for myself, like how do you stop aimbots and like people just cheating and being able to just wipe people out by perfectly locking onto a person or seeing through walls or just doing these exploits, which are just really, defeating?
Yeah, so the main problem that allows that is that some games share too much about other players, and especially enemy players. So for example, if you have a fog of war in a game, so an area where you cannot see unless somebody of your team is into, and an enemy player is there, you should not synchronize any information about that player. Like the enemy team should know nothing about that player, because they technically don't know if they are there or not. So the thing is, some games unfortunately share information about players that are not visible. Okay, and what happens is that once this information is shared with the enemy team, it's on their machine. So if on my machine I have something that is able to identify players in the memory of the computer, like I can figure out their positions. Like there are tools that help you figure out their positions, even if you don't see them in your camera or in your minimap. But if the game knows, like if the information of, hey, this player is in this point of the map is in your computer, then your computer can retrieve that and can somehow show it to you. And so at that point, how it works is that, for example, for aimbots, if I know where a player is, I can calculate where their head is, and then I can automatically, point my cursor at them and try to shoot there. So there are a few issues here. One is like that some games share too much information, and another that helps with cheating is that they use a client authoritative architecture, where clients, it means like player devices, can actually make decisions and decide what happens when an action happens. While the opposite case is the server authoritative architecture, where clients can only say, hey, I want to try to do this. And then I want to try to shoot towards this direction. And then there is a server that says, okay, you can do that, or nope, you're trying to cheat. And then they process the information and they change the state of the game loop. But yeah, so like if you use the wrong architecture and if you share too much, you end up with people who can shoot at the opposite corner of the map. So that's how it is.
So quite naively, I ask, why do companies make these mistakes? Because if you think about it, like if it's all about what information I display to the players in a competitive setting, isn't it as simple as just being like, let's not show other competing players the location of the other team's players, if that makes sense? Like, why do these mistakes happen? And then also, what are some horror stories that you kind of have heard about of games? Like I kind of gave an example of Warzone where you see a lot of kind of grotesque cheating, but yeah, just how do these mistakes get made, and why do they happen?
So mainly it's because of ignorance. Like a lot of studios don't know about how to make multiplayer games in a proper way, because it's not something that you learn easily. So like they simply don't know that this is a problem until it is. And then they say, oh, wow, we really need to fix that. But like at that point, it's already late, because
Too late, yeah.
you have negative reviews on Steam saying, this game is full of cheaters, blah, blah, blah. And so when that kind of things happens, you're already in a very, very hard position, because it's difficult to recover the trust of players. And like the first thing you do if you go to a game on Steam is like you read the reviews. And if it's a multiplayer game and you read one person complaining about cheating, it doesn't matter how many positive reviews you have, but like you will not play that game. Like there's a very strong chance that you will not play that game. So all it takes is one negative review for most people, because they say, oh, I'm not going to waste my time getting crushed by people who are playing unfairly against me, right? That's what happens in your head. So the main reason is ignorance, and the second reason is that even though some teams know about these problems, they decide to ignore them because of time constraints, time and budget constraints. So sometimes, because they require time to be implemented, like the countermeasures require time to be implemented. And for some teams, this could be cost prohibitive. And so they simply decide to take the gamble, you know? Like,
let's see what happens.
Yeah, let's see what happens. And then sometimes it goes well, sometimes it goes very bad. So I have some horror stories. You asked for horror story. Yeah, the most common horror story is like some teams that come to me and say, "Oh wait, we made this super cool single player game, and now we are trying to add multiplayer, and then we realize that we can't add multiplayer without throwing 80% of our code away." And then like, yes, because the point is that multiplayer is not an add-on, it's not a plugin, it's not something that you add later. It changes the very foundation of your game. So you need to start making multiplayer games as multiplayer from day one. Even though you do not plan to have like super huge big numbers, like if you know your game is going to be multiplayer, there is literally no reason to forget about the netcode part. Like netcode is the like the technology, I could say, of your code base that allows you to synchronize information between players, send it around, you know, these kinds of things that we talked about early on. And so like you really need to implement some kind of netcode from day one and to build your features around that, because otherwise you are trying to change the fundamentals of your game later on. And of course the entire house, the entire palace will crumble upon when you start doing that, pretty much.
Got it. So talk to me a bit about authority models. It's something that you mentioned, I think, in just the notes we have, but I don't really understand what that means, especially for players listening. How do you choose the right authority model? What does it mean? And then how do you choose and apply it to a multiplayer game?
So an authority model is basically what defines who makes decisions in the game, like core game loop changing decisions in the game. Okay, so there are mainly three. Two, but we could also say three. The first one is client authoritative. Client authoritative means that the clients, which are the players' devices, okay, make the decision. So if I want to jump, I just press space on my keyboard, and everybody else assumes that I can jump. Okay, I decide if I want to jump or not based on players' input. That's client authoritative. Okay, or even if I hit somebody, with a projectile, I decide if my projectile hit you or not, and how much health do you have now? Do you see where the issue is?
Yeah.
Okay, because I can change my game so that every one of my shots actually deals the maximum possible damage, and then one shot everything. So that's the thing with client authority. So to solve this problem and have somebody impartial actually running the game like an arbiter, you have the server authoritative architecture. Server authoritative means that clients only send inputs around. So they say, hey, I want to shoot. Hey, I want to jump. And then somebody else decides. And this somebody else is like a machine running on the company's premises or in the cloud. And it's called a server, okay? And there is nobody playing on the server. It's just like a machine that relays information between players and makes this decision, And so the server decides, yes, you are able to shoot right now because you're not stunned, you're not dead, you're not, unable to shoot for whatever reason. And when you hit somebody, it says, okay, your weapon is this one, you are using this type of projectile, so yeah, that's the damage that you deal to the other person. So that's the other thing. And then there is like a mixed way in between, which is distributed authority, where it's not a single client that makes a decision, but it's like multiple clients. It's more like peer-to-peer, kind of like peer-to-peer, not exactly that. Mm-hmm. So like everybody is responsible of a little piece of the entire simulation, and then they synchronize information through a central lightweight server that helps them like exchange the information. Like the main two models are like client authoritative and server authoritative. Distributed authority is used mostly for games like Minecraft, Roblox, these social hubs where you have multiple people and then you need a lot of processing power to support them, even for non-competitive games.
So is it not that there's a better one? It depends on the type of game you're building, right?
Absolutely, because like server authoritative comes with higher costs and also additional latency. pretty much. So it has some more challenges, and it's mainly used for competitive games. Like you cannot think of making a competitive game on a client authoritative setup. It would just not work. Like you will have cheaters all the time. But yeah, but for example, if you're making a casual game, like if you're making It Takes Two, just to name one, you can definitely use a client authoritative model.
Yeah, because there's no inherent risk of cheating. You just need the two players to interact with each other. It's not just about preventing cheating. Multiplayer is also making a good experience for players who share a world together and are trying to play together.
Exactly.
I don't know why have you ever played Mario Kart?
Yes.
Yeah, I keep thinking of Mario Kart when I play online. There's always that bit of a lag because I know that. So, wait, just the pretext. I know that Mario Kart, the development of it, has always been difficult because you have to be able to, like the early Mario Karts had a tough time surfacing all these different computers or cars all racing with each other, and they did some really crazy stuff to kind of show that there's a race, but in reality, the computer, when they go out of screen or when they go behind you, it's no longer tracking you because it just didn't have the memory to do so. And as it kind of improved and the technology got better, they were able to show it. So there's a bit of pretext there, which I find interesting. But whenever I'm playing online with Mario Kart 8, for instance, I don't have Mario Kart World yet. There's always this bit of a lag that I get when there's maybe a phantom banana that I slip on, or a player action happens like a split second afterwards, and I'm wondering if that's latency or if that's just how difficult it is to get those specific actions happening at a specific time. Like, how does it work for a game like Mario Kart? Just this is out of my own curiosity more than anything.
So like this type of games usually are server authoritative because they're competitive. Okay. So I don't know the specifics about Mario Kart, of course, Mario. But like, in general, a racing game is competitive, so it's server authoritative. Okay. And then what happens with server authoritative games in general is that you need, like, due to latency, which is the main problem here, you need to implement a way to cope with that. Like, how do we deal with the fact that every input you press on one machine gets to the other machine and to all the other players like 50 milliseconds later? Well, there's something called prediction and reconciliation. Okay, so yeah, so what clients do is that they try to predict what the other players are doing based on what they were doing. So if you were, for example, accelerating, it's a fair assumption that you are still accelerating. If you were accelerating 1 frame ago, it's a fair assumption that you're still accelerating 1 frame later. Okay, so that's what we call prediction. Like, we predict that, and based on this assumption, we simulate locally what's happening. So we see the other player that keeps accelerating. Okay, and then if we get the information that that player stopped accelerating, for example, started steering the wheel, well, then we reconcile the simulation with the result that we got from the server, for example. So there is this split second in which you see weird animations or like people doing something and skipping animations and so on. That's the reconciliation part. So there are a few techniques there. And there's also something that is called Netcode rollback, which is another technique for dealing with latency, where basically you resimulate the entire state of the game based on the correction that just came in. So like I won't go into the technical details because it's a very long topic and can be boring. But like these two prediction and reconciliation and netcode rollback are like the two main ways to deal with latency. What is the problem with those is that, especially with netcode rollback, is that it needs the game to be deterministic. What does deterministic means? It means that given the same inputs, you always get the same outputs. And that is a very big issue in computers, especially for engines, and I go a bit technical here, for engines physics engines that use floating points, mathematics. So, because that's imprecise, basically. Even a tiny fraction of error in a number leads to completely undeterministic results. So the simulation will diverge. You will start seeing an alternate reality when the system tries to recalculate what happens, okay, based on the inputs. So there are a few challenges there, and it's also the reason why physics it's super hard in multiplayer games.
So let's actually go to that What does it mean to have physics in games, especially in multiplayer games, and why is it so hard to get right?
Because of determinism, as we said. So like the thing is, in order for physics to be right, you need to be able to simulate the exact same physics on two different machines. Now, even changing the operating system already causes some issues about that. Even if you run the exact same game on two different machines with two different operating systems, like one on Linux and the other on Windows,
Why?
uh, yeah, you have probably like you have a high chance of deterministic errors, and then there are some engines that are not deterministic by nature, like Unity. Unity's physics system is not deterministic by nature. So if you try to make a deterministic multiplayer game with physics in Unity, it doesn't work. Like you have clients playing in different parallel timelines where something happened and something didn't on the other machine. Which can lead to to a lot of problems because you see, the simulation is simply different. You are playing two different games. Okay.
But why is it different on Linux than on Mac or than on a Windows? For someone, I'm ignorant, so like I'm a dummy. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, computer is a computer. Like I imagine that they're different, like operating systems, and maybe they crunch the numbers a little differently. But I just assume, as a naive player coming in, that if one program runs in one way, the same program should run on another computer in the same way.
Well, the thing is that they are different operating systems. That's the whole
That's
point.
literally okay. Okay.
Different means they do things in different ways, right? That's why you usually don't have you can take an executable and simply put it on a Windows executable and put it on Linux and double click it to run it. That doesn't work. Okay, so there are some core differences there in the way they do things. That makes them mostly incompatible with each other. And so, like, when you are making a game, you really need to be careful about that. Of course, there are nowadays tools that allow you to achieve determinism across platforms and so on, but that is not easy. Like, that requires a very additional effort compared to, hey, I made my game, so let's just compile it and throw it on one
Everywhere.
platform, and that, yeah. So that's how, like, studios trying to make their first multiplayer games do things most of the time because they don't know about those issues, and then they get to the point where they start having players and then they see, oh, but this doesn't work. And now what do we do now? And then at that point it's already very late.
So what's the best operating system? Is it Linux?
No, I don't think that. Like, there are different business needs, I would say, and use cases for different operating systems. Actually, most servers run on Linux because Linux is cheaper. For example, like, you don't have to pay a license to Linux to run servers. Well, you have to do that for Microsoft Windows, for example, and it's very performant. So it's very it's very apt for that service, for running servers. But like, you can't expect players to have Linux machines, so you have to make a Windows build for them or a Mac build for them, so they can play on their own consumer machines. That's it. So like, there are different use cases, and there's no best one. There's one that is most fit for one case, and one that is most fit for another case.
Got you. Okay. I'm learning so much. Genuinely, I never really looked into these things too much. I guess as consumers, as players, we just assume things work. But you're making it very clear that these are very complex things. How dependent? No, actually, different question. Is the future just of competitive multiplayer games and how well they work based on connection speed? Like, are we always going to be limited by the fact that these signals have to go over hundreds of miles or kilometers across the world in milliseconds, and to react back and to go through a server? Isn't it better at the end of the day just to play locally or on LAN? And will we ever reach a point where we can do that? Are there always going to be these issues? I don't know how to explain it.
As long as the speed of light doesn't increase, we are always going to have these issues. So unfortunately, unless we defy the laws of physics, yes, we are probably going to have these issues. What changes is that with more processing power, we are able to do better predictions. So even nowadays, like, there are some games that are able to do this, that are super optimized for these algorithms and are able to reconcile the information very fast and to predict the information very accurately. So with more processing power, we will be more and more able to, like, cover up, to compensate for latency. So even though we do not defy the laws of physics, we can always, solve the issue on the other end. Like, we can become better at predicting. pretty much.
So even if you have the fastest internet in the world, it's still a matter of physics, and you still need to predict something because we can't kind of break the speed of light.
Yeah, unless you are playing with somebody that is very close geographically to you, you are always going to face that kind of issue. But like even a few milliseconds make an entire difference, especially in games like fighter games, where you have frame animations, where every frame counts. Even a latency of 16 milliseconds is going to have an impact. Lower than that, not. If your game is running at 60 FPS, for example, frames per second, because it takes 16 milliseconds to process one single frame, if you do the math. But like for more than 16, that's going to take the need of prediction and reconciliation or netcode rollback.
Super cool, honestly. Can you talk to me a little bit about your work at Unity? Because that's a really big, like, what is Unity first for the audience that don't know? What do they do?
Yeah.
And
So, sorry, I thought you finished.
no. And what's your role in there? Sorry.
Yeah. So Unity is a game engine company, I would say, even though nowadays it does. I mean, that's how it was born 12 years ago or something, 11 years ago or something. But nowadays they also do other things. They have other verticals about industry, architecture, blah, blah, blah. So, but like the main core of Unity is a game engine. Okay, so they make this software, we make this software that you can use to make your own games. So you don't have to reinvent a game engine from scratch, which can take you like several years of development to get the engine, and then you have to make the game with the engine. So the idea is that you can use Unity and you can make games faster. You don't have to focus on the underlying technology. You can instead focus on like your gameplay mechanics and making your game. So that's what Unity is. What I do at Unity, I work in the multiplayer development experience now, which is like the latest name. We change it every 3 weeks when there is a reorganization, like in every big company. So probably if you watch this podcast in 1 month,
It'll be a different acronym.
Yeah, it will be exactly. But like what my team does right now is that we take care of tools that help you make multiplayer games. So specifically, what I do right now is I take care of samples and templates. Samples are like example projects that show you how to do something, and templates are starting projects, like projects that you download and then you build your own game based on that. Like they quick start you, they give you ready to use systems, features that work out of the box. So you don't have to figure out, hey, how do I connect two players with each other? How do I have a game loop where information can be synchronized? How do I handle latency? How do I detect that the game ended? And these kind of things. So that's what I do right now. I basically work on those two types of things that help people develop multiplayer games faster.
I'm going to play devil's advocate because I've had chats about Unity and Unreal with other individuals, and some have told me that it's always better for a game to build their own engine because that makes the game feel better. Like if you're going to build a Far Cry, or if you're going to build, and maybe this is all in Unity and Unreal, but a lot of companies will build their own, like EA has Frostbite, I think, etc. What is the take in terms of using these, which I think are very handy and very incredible tools out of the box to have all these physics in them, so you don't have to do a bunch of work, compared to a company that takes the time and builds their own kind of physics engine, their own multiplayer kind of frameworks? What are the pros and cons of doing so?
Yeah. So let me answer that question. I would also give you a bit of historical context before. So many nowadays big companies have their own game engine because a couple decades ago there was no general purpose engine like Unity and Unreal came available to the public pretty recently, I would say, in the history of games. Okay, so there was no other option in the past, and of course like these big companies that invested a lot of money into making their own version of what they need to do to make their own games, they are it's hard for them to switch to something different. There are companies that are switching. For example, Kingdom Hearts 3, which is not a multiplayer game, but like Kingdom Hearts 3 was made with Unreal, and the first Kingdom Hearts were not. Okay, so there are and that's from Square Enix. Okay,
Yeah.
so there are a few companies that do the switch nowadays, but others are simply they've built this tool that works and they have no reason to switch, so they just stay with that. But like, that said, what is a good reason for doing your own game engine? Yes, of course, you have something that is tailored and optimized for your exact game that you want to make. So that's the main advantage in reality. What are the disadvantages? The disadvantage is that a tool that you make is only known to you. So if you need somebody to like start working on your engine, you can't search for somebody that has, let's say, Frostbite experience or CryEngine experience if the CryEngine is not available to the public. So it becomes harder for like from a workforce point of view to find out people who have the knowledge to work on your tool. They will have to learn your tool first. So that means that your talent pool is very limited, okay? And if you have a problem with something, if you have a bug, who do you ask? Like, you can only ask the internal team because like nobody knows how your engine works, right?
You're never gonna fire that guy, right? He's like, we need you. Like, you can't leave.
I mean, the industry is doing that, but like, so the thing is that it becomes very hard to maintain your own engine, because you are the only person you can ask help to, and that is a big problem in reality. Which is why a lot of games actually carry bugs from one game to another when they are done with custom engines. With custom engine, with in-house engines. So, and the other disadvantage is that basically there is less tooling and plugins and things that you can add to your game and integrate into your game because the community is simply not there. Like, there is no community around custom engines. That's why it's custom, because it's only owned by the company. And so the community is the community of the company. There is nobody developing plugins for you. Well, if you use Unreal or if you use Unity, there are the asset store, there are plugins, community contributions, GitHub repositories where you can download anything and that you can integrate into your own project. So the advantage of general purpose engines is that you have a community of people that supports you and can help you, and you can find a lot of talent that is able to quickly ramp up and start working on your project because they already know the tool pretty much.
Can you talk to me a little bit about plugins and like community building around engines? How does that work? How do you build? Just how do you get people to build additions to that hook into an engine? Like, what does it mean to even build a plugin?
So, like, I can speak from the Unity perspective because I never used Unreal seriously. So, like, let me talk about my Unity experience, okay? But as a developer, not as a
please.
that works in it. So, as a developer, like at my studios, because I had two, like the one that died and the one that it's running now.
And we'll get into those.
We get it. Like, you always have the need to build custom tools for your team because you have repetitive actions in your project that you want to automate. You want to help designers edit things that will normally be editable only by developers, So you need to build some tooling in your engine for your project, okay? And sometimes you build these tools in a way that is so generic that it could be shared with the rest of the world. Like, if I build a cheat window where I can run cheats, for example, if I'm making a card game, I want to draw 10 cards, okay, or I want to deal a lot of damage to my opponents, or I want to destroy everything that is on the board, I can do that in two ways. I can either play the cards that lead me to that result, or I can have a quick window in my editor where I can press a button to draw 10 cards, right? So I definitely want to do that because I don't want to waste half an hour drawing 10 cards with the standard game mechanics. And if I make that tool, then I can make it general enough so that anybody can download that and create their own cheats. So I can put that stuff on the asset store or on a marketplace, and like I can let anybody download that and maybe pay me for doing that. So that's how plugins are born, like from a team that is trying to create something that is useful for themselves, and they say, oh wow, this can be useful for somebody else working on the same type of game, or like this is so generic that it could be used in any game. And so that's it. That's it. I don't know if I answered your
No,
question.
no, no. You did. You did. It's super interesting. Like that the pro and obviously the benefit of having your own internal tooling and empowering the team. You want everyone to be able to work more efficiently and quicker on kind of the same thing. And if you don't have that and everyone's just trying to create like bespoke instances of change, it slows everything down. So it's largely, I feel, a discussion of efficiency at the end of the day when it comes to
Yes.
having your own engine and then building around it.
And
Um,
also about like
yeah.
preventing mistakes, because the thing is that if you have to do everything manually, every time there is a human involved, you have to assume that they can make mistakes. So even if you write the best step-by-step guide, somebody might miss a step. Okay, and then they can click the wrong thing, and they can do the wrong thing, and then everything blows up. So if you have automations and tools and these kind of things, you can always reduce that risk of human error, and that means that you spend less time putting out fires than you spend, making the actual game.
Yeah,
So
I
it's also
think
a matter of risk management.
these exactly. These are the things I think a lot of players that maybe don't have as much insight in what game development is, like don't really see the drawbacks or when companies can't make changes very quickly and they don't exactly know how to say it because it's difficult to communicate to your player base, hey, look, we're on an old engine. We're only as quick as we can be. In the next game we're planning to move. So for instance, I know that Halo I think was by Bungie and then they moved to a different studio and they also changed and went to Unreal. So I think Halo 5 or Halo 4, I can't remember. I haven't played Halo in ages, but I know that they moved that. Um, I just don't think players have that understanding when they see like FIFA's on the new Frostbite engine. They just think, oh, cool, it's gonna have better graphics. But like the value is truly internally that like now we can work quicker, we can make changes faster, we can onboard new employees. We don't have to depend on potentially the same ones that are underperforming. We can expand, we can scale. There's a lot of efficiencies that I think get lost because people just don't understand what game engines are and how these things work and how that connects to multiplayer.
Yep.
So let's pivot a little bit because I do want to talk about you are the co-founder and CEO of Fatum Games, and you're
Yay.
building this really cool card game, which I took a really good look at, and I just want you to pitch it to me like you're pitching it to the audience. What type of player is this? What type of game is this?
What type of game it
And
is? Okay.
how's it going?
Yep. So the game is called Ariokan or Ariokan, depending on how you want to pronounce it. It doesn't matter. It's like the Balatro thing. Is it Balatro or Balatro?
Exactly.
Nobody knows. But like, okay, so Ariokan is the online card game, competitive card game, where actually you can create your own cards and invent new strategies every day to break the meta. So the thing is, what problem are we trying to solve here? And why was this game born? So I've been a like lifelong card game player. So I always played Yu-Gi-Oh! Since I was very young, actually. I think I started when I was 6 or something. And then I later on played other games like Legends of Runeterra and blah, blah, blah. So, and all these games have one problem in common, which is that every time a strategy proves to be the most, powerful strategy because of balancing reasons,
Mhm.
everybody starts copy pasting decks and everybody plays the same
The
with
meta.
the yes, that's the meta, exactly. And the result is that everybody gets bored pretty soon because nobody wants to face the same deck over and over. That kind of removes the entire point of card games where you customize your deck and you create your own strategy and all these kind of things. But it's hard to customize and create your strategy if the developers are the ones deciding what cards exist or not. So me and my team wanted to reverse this formula, and we said, why don't we let people create balanced cards? So not stuff that says, oh, you win. No, that doesn't make any sense. But like, why don't we let people create balanced cards that they can actually, customize and they can make their own stories, they can make their own characters, and build a deck that represents themselves, and also that can, spawn
Oh.
new combos, game mechanics, and deck types every day. So we went into this crazy idea 5 years ago, and we actually are making it. Like nowadays, we have a game that is in closed beta with a few players that are very, very attached to it. I've got people playing for three years. Like it's crazy. It's a crazy retention thing, and they make hundreds of cards every month, literally. Like I think we got like 8,000 cards nowadays. And to give you a comparison, Yu-Gi-Oh has been around for like 30 years now, almost, and they have 20,000. We've been around like in the beta for like 3, and we have 8,000. So we
That
should
is so
be
cool.
we should get to that point very, very quickly, probably in a year or two after the release. But yeah.
So it's almost like you're not I don't want to say outsourcing because it sounds very businessy, but you're empowering players to instead of rather keeping the design of cards internally or the design of the game, you're empowering players to kind of obviously keeping them within the bounds of what is fair in a way, like a certain amount of resource, a certain amount of power, but you're giving them the creativity. If you love plants or you love trees, you can make a whole deck of cards based on magical trees that do incredible things. And
Yeah.
it's almost childlike because I think when we were young, like when we were maybe like 5 to 10 years old, whenever you'd make a game, you wouldn't follow like things that were already told to you. You'd make up your own stuff. You'd make up your own characters. You make up your own. And I think that kind of gets lost as kind of you get into like these card games like Yu-Gi-Oh! And they create their own culture and their whole play style. And I just love this idea. I've never actually like really heard of other games that do this, that you can create your own stuff. You can create your own cards. I just think that's really cool. How hard is that to do though? Because like a player can obviously can a player make like a really powerful card that breaks the game, or can they create a meta? Will they find a meta regardless? Like how do you stop people from how do you keep it open and fair?
Yeah, yeah. So there are many, many layers to this question. Okay, and
Yeah.
let me address one thing that you said. Like when we were, kids and younger, we always said, as you said, we were not copying, what other people told us to do, but we were like thinking about our own characters, our own stories. Like I remember playing with, building blocks and making my own characters and making them fight and so on. Like because as children, we have stories in our head that we want to tell to the world, right? We make some people make drawings, some people make paintings, some people play games to immerse themselves in other stories, and some people write. But like in this case, what I'm trying to do with my team is that we are trying to give you a tool that lets you like express what is in your mind. Okay, so if we bring in freedom of expression in the world of card games, so that you can invent your own characters and make the cards that represent your stories. Even if you have like a D&D, have you ever played D&D, by the way? Like
I have.
Yeah. So like if you want to make a deck inspired by your Dungeons and Dragons characters, you can do that. So to answer your question, how do we keep the game fair? Well, the entire thing, the entire system is based on it's like a point buy system. So you have mana, that is the main resource that you can use to play cards during a match, and you get some mana every turn. And like, so if you want to play a card, you have to play its mana cost. And basically, the more powerful the card is, the more its mana cost will raise. Okay, so if you add, things that do damage to the opponent, or if you put higher stats or better keywords that give, peculiarities to the card, they cost increases. If you add disadvantages, like you have to sacrifice your own life points, you have to sacrifice your own cards, you have to discard cards from your hand, that lowers the cost of the card. So the balancing is in like the combination of these scores. Everything has a score in Ariokan, like a mana score. And so what you add to the card, if it makes it stronger, it increases the cost. And if it makes it weaker or like more disadvantageous to play, it lowers the cost. So like the balancing is there. It's in mathematics. Like we have formulas, a lot of mathematics and a lot of formulas that tie every resource to a number. And then based on the numbers that you use, based on the resources that the card uses or affects, you get a higher cost or lower cost cards.
And I imagine that's something that happens in Yu-Gi-Oh! And other card games, right? That's basic mathematics, right? That's how you create these cards to begin with in other games, or
kind of like, for example, Yu-Gi-Oh! Doesn't have numbers, doesn't have mathematics in the cost of cards, for example. So it's a bit harder there. But like in games like Hearthstone or Legends of Runeterra, that's pretty much what teams do, or I will expect them to do actually, because I never worked in those teams. When they figure out, should we put like a 2 or a 3 as a cost on this card? I guess they have some,
so
Excel
you don't
sheet.
actually know. You just figured this out on your own.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean,
That's crazy, man.
I guess that's how it works. Like that's how I've done it, and I guess that's how other teams are doing it. Otherwise, I don't know. Do they just roll dice and then what comes up they put?
I don't know, man. I just assumed that like if you're gonna build such a card game and you have to create a complex balancing mechanic, I would have thought, at least I would have thought you'd look into like how other companies do it and just say like, okay, how do they build these cards? It must be math. It must be some form of balancing. But the fact that you figured this out yourself and created your own way of balancing, and maybe this is how they do it, maybe not, but I just find that so cool and impressive that you actually did that. But please continue.
And talking about the balancing, so there was a time, especially in the early iterations of the game, where people were able to make super broken cards in the sense of like the costs were not adjusted properly. Like nowadays, after 3 years of alpha and beta, we know how much something is worth. We know what needs to be, what needs to have a certain value and what not. Of course, there are still improvements that we can make, but like it has been a couple of years since the game is not broken on the balancing point. So I feel like we are in a very, very good spot right now. And as I said, you cannot simply type what the card does. Like it's more like Minecraft. You have some blocks, more like Lego. You have some blocks that you can combine. Okay, when you combine them, the cost of the card changes. So we provide the blocks as developers, but then the people decide how to combine them. There are like billions of combinations in the game that are possible. And the coolest part is that sometimes we see a new deck showing up with mechanics that were introduced 3 years ago. So like they've always been there. Somebody simply hasn't discovered them yet.
There's so many combinations. That's I can't think of any other games besides maybe Dungeons and Dragons where you can just make up your own kind of just story and power structures and again, this whole idea that so much of gaming now is so meta focused, so mid-maxed. Everyone's trying to find the best build, and then developers have to work around that. And then they have to create a new meta, and they just have to shuffle things, and then they have to nerf or OP something to just flip it around. And you see this in so many games, and I just find your concept and what you're doing with your game very, very fascinating because that. Sorry, go on.
Just to clarify, like that thing happens to us as well. Like we also need to make balancing and so on sometimes. Also because we provide some types of cards that players cannot normally create. Like there are the main characters, let's say, of the universe of Ariokan, which are the gods and the legends. They are not provided by the players. Like they cannot create those normally. So we developers create them. But when a player wins a tournament or a ranked season, we give them the opportunity to create those cards. And those cards are like unique. They have unique effects that you cannot use in the cards creator. Which is the editor, basically the in-game editor where you can create the cards. So sometimes we need to also nerf or empower something. So we are not immune to that mechanic, of course, like every competitive game. But the main difference is that even when a meta shows up, if things are balanced, then what happens is that somebody else figures out the anti-meta strategy, and then like they break the meta and they create a new one. So that's the whole point. It's the card game where you create balanced cards to invent new combos and break the meta. That's the whole pitch. So
yes, you play against someone, maybe they beat you really badly, like you go back to the drawing board, but rather than waiting for maybe the developer to release new cards or to find new cards, you strategize your own way of defeating them by coming up with new cards and you potentially just find a new meta. What's it like building a community around this game?
Difficult. Like every community building initiative.
Of course.
Yes. I mean, to be honest, we have been very, very focused on like creating the game. But we also started community building with our low budgets and so on some time ago, mainly organic. Like we went to Reddit and started posting about the game here and there and talking about stuff. Also, we tried to hijack some posts from our competitors, like riding the sentiment that is there. Like if you go under any Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel post on Facebook, you have 50 comments of people saying, "Oh, I hate the meta. I hate that I have to go against the same decks over and over." Blah blah blah. So what's the best? What better opportunity for me to go there and say, yeah, I hate that too. That's why I moved to Ariokan. Like, and some people get interested about that, and some people actually came into our community from these types of messages, and then they sticked because they figured out that was exactly what they were looking for. So that's hard to be honest, but one step at a time we are doing it.
And that's kind of like the new, I don't necessarily know if it's new, but that is kind of the way you need to market like games in general. Like you need to go into these social communities, find those comments where players are maybe complaining about a game, and find those opportunities to reply and provide some value. And then other players see it, and that's why Reddit, Twitter, all these different platforms are so great, because then you can very humanly reply to something and say, "Hey, you guys don't like the meta? Well, this game you can make your own meta and you can shuffle it around." How much has kind of your perspective on marketing changed releasing all your game studios and doing all the work you've done?
So with the first studio, we completely neglected marketing, right? And when I started my second studio, I was like, okay, we need to make things very differently. So less in-house, more marketing focus, and so on. And in fact, my co-founder Umberto is like the marketing guy. Like he's a specialist in growth marketing, and he's the guy that is handling all these initiatives. And what he does is like he also gets in touch with influencers, he gets in touch with the press, like he gets in touch on several channels. He tries to figure out several opportunities for us to market the game. Opportunities that I will never think about because I'm ignorant and I don't know them. Like in the same way, somebody that doesn't make multiplayer games, they don't know what they don't know. And that's why they call me to help them. So like the approach changed drastically in a sense that we started focusing on marketing since I would say not day one, but day two, since we had something that could be showed around to people or that people could play, we've started focusing on, inviting people and making them play and getting feedback from them and this kind of stuff. So we went for like a very marketing first approach in this sense. While building the game. So trying to do that from as early as possible instead of waiting until the game was like already complete.
Of course. I think that shows for anyone that wants to get into games, especially young people, which I think is a big point of this podcast, is just to show how dynamic game development is and how it's not just necessarily development, but you do need to have strong marketing, strong community building. What is your advice to people trying to build their own game studio like you did at 17 and how you've done recently with your new game coming out or that's in beta? What advice do you have for people trying to just build their own studio?
Yeah, so first of all, try to focus on something that is doable and achievable in a small amount of time, maybe 6 months, okay, top. Because like it's more important, like even building a simple game will allow you to understand the process, at least a part of the process, because the process changes a bit depending if you're making a single player, multiplayer, large scale, small scale, blah, blah, blah game. But like you need to figure out how to have a pipeline, you need to figure out how a 3D model gets done starting from a concept, a 2D concept, and how do we end up animating it and putting it into the game. So this is like something that you only learn on the field. Like there's no amount of theoretical blubbering that you can learn at university about this stuff or at courses. Like you need to do. Okay, that's something that I always tell people. You need to do. The best way for learning is doing things, because when you do things, you realize many aspects of the job that are not on paper, that you do not read around. So do something small and publish it. Even if it sucks, publish it. Get used to get feedback from players and get used to get haters, because you will get haters, a lot of haters. Like we got some for Ariokan saying, oh, but if they don't bother making the cards, why should I bother? Dude, what does that even mean? It's okay when you create your own cards, like, and we also do the legends and the gods, but like what kind of feedback is that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's like going to Minecraft and say, oh, if they don't give me pre-generated words, I'm not doing that.
That's the point, bro.
Okay, but like, so you need to get used to the internet being a mess and negative feedback and so on, and also how to handle that, because you have two ways to handle that. You can handle that by getting angry yourself, or you can handle that by being polite and trying to understand what the other people are saying. So there's a lot of learning there, and you can do this with any game, like even if you publish it. So try to do that, possibly not on Steam, because we're already flooded with shovelware, so that would complicate the problem. But if you go to itch.io and platforms that are more indie friendly and beginner friendly, you will have like more positive reviews and more positive feedback from people. So that would be the first advice that I give to somebody. And the second is try to figure out a way to market your game in a creative way. Like the worst thing you can do is run ads campaigns most of the time, especially if you don't have a lot of budget, because that's completely useless. So try to figure out a way to market your game in a different way. Go to Reddit, go to your competitors' communities, try to understand what the problems people have and why your game will give them a good reason to be played, because that's the thing. A lot of developers try to make games that they think other people will play because they like them, but that's not true. Like people play games because they have reasons to play games. It has to appeal the target, not the developer. The developer can make something that is fun for them, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be fun for the target audience.
Yeah, you are not the player, right? Like that's something that you say in product management. You say it all the time when you're building a product. You are not the user, man. You gotta go out and get feedback and understand who your target audience is. Who are you trying to target specifically? And oftentimes building something that you find fun is very powerful and can get you started, but you do have to go for feedback. You do have to get it out there. You do have to go through what I think you said very, very acutely, which is a complicated internet. Like people are going to give you different feedback points. People are going to either push you on the right path or push you away from the path. And I think that's the hardest part about building a game is like, what identity do you want this game to have? And what is it that you're trying to build? And then how can you make it appeal to the right people? Or if your goals are different, to as many people as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. No, great. So last but not least, you're a consultant for multiplayer. Where can people book you for multiplayer consulting? It's something that I think is quite needed from a lot of companies from what it sounds.
But sorry, go on.
No, you seem to be quite the expert. So just for the audience, for anyone listening, like how can anyone reach out to you and just ask you more about multiplayer?
You can just go on my LinkedIn. Like I'm very active on LinkedIn where I publish posts and so on. I'm also about multiplayer, so that's free. You can read stuff for free, and it's going to give you some value already. But if you want, like, if you have a serious commercial project that you want to do, you can just go to my LinkedIn page. There's a link behind below my profile. I think below my name or something. You can click there, and that will lead you to my website or whatever I'm using nowadays when you're watching this podcast to attract people, you know. And from that point, you can simply book a call with me. There's going to be a link to book a call with me.
Perfect. And we'll add all the links below in the podcast and the clips. But Paolo, thank you so much. Grazie for coming on to the show.
Thank you.
And it's been an absolute pleasure learning from you and everything about multiplayer and beyond. I don't think it was just about multiplayer at the end of the day, and that makes a great conversation. So thank you again.
I hope this is going to be helpful for you guys, and feel free to reach out if you need help with something.